let's go the editing workflow behind the Adam Powell shoot. So as you can see, what I'm doing here is we got out on the day and I just need to place all my lights and all of the props. Shooting in a garage like this is quite difficult because everything is reflective. We ended up using 6 lights, all bounced off of different surfaces in the garage to give the effect that we want, 2 of them in the car itself. We then settled on this image as the final. You can see that here. Now, the first thing I do when I have an image like this, I need to be able to work on different areas of the image at different stages. I like to be able to do things very, very specifically. As boring as it is, the first job was to go and create all of these paths and save them all for each individual element, so I could then work on separate sections of the image together, with the shed itself being the considered background. Once I had that done as a Camera Raw Smart filter and punched up the contrast and the highlights and the clarity and the texture, way more than what you should, okay? But it looks terrible, but what I wanted to make sure was that this internal area inside the car was lit up. Now, we had 2 lights in there, so it was definitely a feature. I also wanted to make sure that Adam himself was nice and lit, and every element could then simply be worked down or left as it is. First thing is the background color and tone. So a curve layer, apply that, and if I turn this mask off, you can see that's what it would have been if I applied it to the whole image, but because I had all those paths done, I can mask out the bits that I didn't want to. Then I had the lights, which I just dodged up. You can just see in the top left, I just made them a little bit brighter because some of those shadows clipped them out. The next thing over here, you can see this boot panel that we had, which was quite a cool feature. It was a nice bright yellow, but when we photographed it, we put a light with a snoot on it. You can see the light was very directional around there, so I just wanted to even that out, and I've just done that by dodging and burning. Pretty simple, but it makes that feature look much more evenly lit than what we could get it on the day. Next thing was the trolley jack here, just because the color against there is much brighter than what it should be against that yellow. Only very, very small detail, but when you see this big, it's going to show. The next layer was the power tool on the dashboard. This one here, it's a pneumatic tool, and all I've done is taken out this little blue tinge. You can barely see it in this image, but it had a blue fringe around it just from pushing the contrast too high, so I had to remove that. Just did it with a hue saturation layer. Next thing was the car itself. Put a little bit of contrast into it in certain areas with curves layer and burn some of those highlights down. So as you can see, the reflections just softened a little bit to give the car a little bit more punch. Onto Adam himself, all I've done is just brightened up the reds a little bit, particularly in his welding helmet there. You can see that if I turn that on and off for you, just to give it a little bit more color. The rim in the foreground here, it was a really cool thing to have sitting on a tire. I just wanted to bring it up a little bit, so I've just given it a little bit of extra shine with a curves layer. All right, so I was getting pretty happy with this. The next thing I wanted to do was just some overall adjustments, and this is where you're going to see some big changes as well. So overall tone and color. The first thing was a curves layer, right, which gives everything a lot more punch, right? Just that big boost in contrast. So then I've had things which were too colorful, too yellow, too red. So then it's just a matter of bringing that back down with a hue saturation layer. Overall then, I just felt it was a little bit dull. So I just put in a very, very small amount of exposure, just brought that up. I could have done that in Camera Raw and gone back and adjusted it here, but same to do it up here. It's just one more layer. And then an overall brightness contrast layer as well, just to give it some extra punch, which really makes a huge difference. The next thing I do is my clean layers. Now these you have to zoom right in on, and the way I do it is with a guide layer. I've shown you guys this before in my previous video. So I create a guide layout that looks something like this, all right? And then I zoom in to 100%, and I'll start way down in one corner. I'll actually usually go a little bit more than 100%, and I'll work up one side, and I'll make little adjustments as I go. Then the first one, if I believe here, with these highlights here. So if I turn that clean layer on, you can see that I've just gotten rid of those. So that is how I do it, and I'll go up one column, down the next, and yeah, it's slow, it's laborious, but it makes sure that everything is absolutely perfect. Let me just clear those guides. And I then had some fringing issues around different parts of the image. So if I zoom right in over here on the oxyacetylene, you can see here, all right, you've got this little green fringe that goes down there. And there was a couple of magenta ones. You can see here, there's a magenta fringe in certain areas. So to get rid of them, hue saturation layers, and you can work them out of the equation. You can see the magenta's gone. If I turn that back off and on, and you can see the greens are also gone there if I turn that off and on. The next thing you can see here, there's a fringe, a white fringe around the oxy torch. I didn't like it, so I also just cleaned that up. All right, the last thing I did was put a vignette on the image like that. It just focuses the viewer's attention onto the central part of the image. And that's it. That's it. That's the final image. So if I close all these layers up for you, turn all of these off, all right, that's where we started. And that's where we finished. I hope you like it as well. If you're interested in any more of the detail about what I've done here, hit me up in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. Other than that, if you want to know more about this image, head over to the podcast page on my website and have a listen to the podcast with Adam Powell, and you'll see the story that we were trying to tell in distilling Adam's life, everything he does, all the cool stuff. He's a great guy, very relatable, good listen. I hope you like it. Until next time, bye.